I'm Basil Siakos, the Director of Programming for Doc NYC. Joining me today is filmmaker and photographer Cheryl Dunn to discuss her film about the artist Dash Snow, Moments Like This Never Last. Cheryl, welcome and thanks so much for being part of Doc NYC.
Thank you for inviting me.
I love your film. I'm not usually so effusive, but I really responded so much to this film. I personally didn't know Dash, but I have mentioned your film in passing to people that did. And without question, the first thing they say is how much they loved him and that they remember how friendly he was. And I think this film really does him justice, again, not knowing him, but just being able to experience his life in that way. You were friends with Dash, and can you talk a little bit about how you first met and how you began documenting him?
Yes, I was kind of entrenched in documenting a lot of graffiti in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to make a film about graffiti writers. And so I met him. He was just such a magical New York City creature, you know, like he just had this essence about him and he just effused this energy that was super special. And I asked him if I could film him, and I started doing interviews of him, and I curated him in his first group show, which was at Deitch Project's Session the Ball. And because he had shown me, he would walk around with like a pocket, well, in his like a stack of Polaroids like this, and he just like had such an excitement of like a joyful child, you know, wanting to show you what he made, and they were unbelievable. And I suggested to the team that we should put him in the show, and they were like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "He's amazing." And so in that show, I also had a piece, and I made a film about him and about another New York City character, Dash being a kid that's up all night doing whatever he's doing in this massive playground of New York City, and a businessman who would be, you know, up all day sleeping when Dash was up to these two diverse New York City characters. And so we started filming a lot, and then I just continued to, we were buddies, and I continued to go to his shows and document all his exhibitions and ask him about it. And that was kind of my practice with a lot of artist friends of mine, because I just always felt like it's so important to document artists early in their careers, because it's just this really precious, fleeting time that you can never get back. And I always responded to that historically myself. And so it was a practice that I did with others and with him as well.
And going back to the Deitch show, you know, and that stack of Polaroids, was there like a particular moment you're like, wow, this guy has something and I really should include it? Was there an image that really struck you that needed to be included and be seen by others?
I think the thing about Dash's work is the volume of it, and just the natural, it was just an extension of him. You know, it was a practice. It was really just the action of it. And so to say this one or that one, it was kind of all of them put together, and the whole action of doing this consistently, and just the seamless flow of like creating and being like one thing.
Right. So Dash died in 2009, about 11 years ago now, at the age of 27. When did you first think about pulling together the archive that you have and then pulling other sources to make a documentary about him?
Probably about a year and a half after, you know, that he had quite a lot of notoriety, particularly at the end of his life and internationally. And there were people coming around New York, calling up others, asking us if we had footage, saying that they were coming from Europe and they were going to make a film about Dash Snow. And I would say, did you know him? And they're like, well, I, you know, wrote graffiti one day, one summer, you know. And I just felt like, also through past experiences and different projects that I was involved in, I just thought, you know, this story needs to be protected, and it needs to be made from the inside and by his friends and people that knew him. And I just, you know, the first thing that gets in the world is what people deem to be truth or what they know of something. And I just expressed to Dan and friends, you know, like, we got to protect this story. And they were like, you should make it. And I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, I'll try.
And so you thought about it soon after he passed, but it's been several years. Do you think, did you need the time sort of to kind of have distance from his passing in order to kind of put this together in this way? Like, would it have been a lot different if you had made a film right at that moment, sort of, within a year or so of his passing?
I think so. But one thing that struck me and inspired me to embark on it soon was just the nature of memory, and how it fades, and people's recollections fades, and your heart, how you feel about someone leaves, and then there's a hole in your heart, and that hole starts to mend, and your feelings towards it. I wanted to preserve that extreme feeling that he gave to people, and I wanted to record that.
And so while the film is absolutely and clearly Dash's story, it also beautifully captures this specific period in New York City, this post-September 11th period, those first few years of sort of, weird energy and just sort of like what's going to happen to our world. What was it like not only to sort of revisit your memories of Dash and his life, but also to look back at your memories of that time period and the sort of formative impact that they had on you and others within your circle?
Well, it's pretty interesting that we'll be able to put it in the world at this time, this moment in time, when the New York that we, New York changes daily, right? But that you can't even do any semblance of those things and that community feeling, because really it's a film about community, and people that found their own family, people that came here to find like-minded friends and form a new family, and that New York can't be like that now, and also was less and less like that, but for me. But I'm sure every day kids come to go to school here, they go to Bushwick, they're not doing it in downtown Manhattan, they're doing it their way, So, but it was what I really enjoyed about the process was to be able to go into my archive and find this beautiful dance performance by Maria Hasabi. These art happenings that happened that I always just had a camera and I shot, and then I would be like, oh my God, and I have this, like just kind of deep diving in every videotape I ever took of that time and finding, having time again with these art happenings that were happening at the time. That was really enjoyable and made me happy to be able to share it to a new group of people that were not here.
Absolutely. And I wonder sort of if you can talk a little bit about that process. So you went through your own extensive archive. You're a noted photographer and made documentaries before, so you've got this large body of work. But sort of how long did it take you to kind of go through all of that? And then what was the process of kind of identifying other sources of friends with their own recordings and things like that to pull together the look and feel that you wanted to achieve with this project?
Well, Agathe Snow had a lot of tape because she did Stamina, that project that at the time was like, oh, here's this thing that she did, and then subsequently became, was in the Whitney Biennial, and then was in this huge, they reimagined it in the Guggenheim a couple of years ago. So she had a lot of tape of that and friends at the time. And, I felt like I did not, there was no stone unturned as far as finding, there were many still pictures, but it was right before people had video on their phone. So, people do carry video cameras, but of course not as much. And then, but do they back that video up? Do they know where it is? Probably not. So, but then I got audio tapes from journalists, and then ironically, then this summer, or like last summer, I posted something on Instagram, and somebody hit me up from Paris and from London and said, oh, I have this 16 millimeter that I shot of Dash in Paris for this Agnes B art show. And then we went down in the catacombs underneath Paris and shot for this whole night. And I'm like, well, where are you? He's like, I'm in London. I'm like, I'm flying to London tomorrow. Let's meet. So, you know, we were almost done. I'm like, and then I found this unbelievable like treasure of new footage. So, you know, I really sleuthed it out, but I bet the movie will come out and people will be like, I had this, you know.
Right.
I mean, you have to call it at some point.
Yeah. But I wonder, like, you know, I know there are, you know, like groups of there are Dash's work is out there, and there's been monographs and those kinds of things. Like, is there work out there that is there work that is not out there that you could assemble into a companion book for people that have not experienced all of his work, his Polaroids, etc.?
That's not real. That's probably, yeah. There is actually, you know, he shot also 35 millimeter cameras, and that work is really not out there. It's, you know, the photography is basically, that's been published is mostly the Polaroids, but Jade, his woman of the time, has an incredible amount of still images from 35 millimeter. And yeah, there is a few things in there, but yes.
Right.
And he made films, and I, you know, I used a lot of his own work, filmic work, 8 millimeter in the film, and it was beautiful, you know, and that was really also a great thing to have to use.
Oh, absolutely. As you said earlier, and as we see and hear in the film, you know, the film is so much about this surrogate family that he forms, and sort of the intentional family he creates from other outsiders or artists or anybody else that sort of, you know, resonated with him. But he does also have, and you talk about in the film, this very fraught relationship with his family. You know, how much, I think that his sister was involved in some way with providing some material, but how much were the family in general involved with him at the end of his life and in his project?
I'm not really privy to that. I did reach out to family members, and some declined, and some didn't. And that is a prickly question.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated, certainly. I
just hope that they're pleased, and that. Because I made it with all intentions of love and sharing his aura and his being, and in my opinion, you know, there's characters that artists that come around in New York City like that only once in a while, that really change the course of people's lives and art, and he was one of them. And I just, you know, I feel his work and he embodied something that's very important and about New York City. And
completely agree. And I didn't mean anything, you know, negative about it. I think you handled it very well in terms of how you bring up his kind of complicated family history and connections and all of that, and his relationship
touch upon it because it informed who he was, you know.
Right.
So, but it's not a film about that. It's a film about him. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I have one more question, and you alluded to it earlier, which is that, so he passed away just a couple of years after the iPhone came out, and certainly wasn't part of this strange world we have of social media, selfies, camera phones in the same way. And also, I think you mentioned in the film, he didn't even have a phone. So, you know, do you think that if he were still around and still making work, do you think he would have sort of maintain that distance from technology and from like the digital sphere? Would he have stayed analog, or do you even know at this point? Would he have done something completely different?
I think so. He was very suspect of that, and so many of his fears and premonitions came to be true, you know. And and it came from his like outlawness and you know, his favorite book was, one of his favorite books is, I think, was about this outlaw, Jack Black, written, oh, my assistant's here. Jack Black. Jack Black is the writer. It's called You Can't, I think it's called You Can't Win. Oh, man, I don't want to get this wrong, but it's basically like turn of the century outlaw that travels around, rides the trains, like, and I listened to it like 4 times, and I could see all these like tricks that they did to not get caught, you know, like what they wore, don't wear, you know, like if you rob a house, you better not, you know, have a piece of dog hair on your clothes or something, you know, just like these weird, funny tricks, and don't have, you know, don't have flashy buttons, you know, like that an outlaw would do to not get caught. And he loved that kind of stuff, and he loved really, he kind of was a kid from a different era in a way. He really embraced these other eras in his embodiment and self and work. And so I really think he would not, you know, who knows, but I really think that he would steer clear of that.
Yeah. Well, with that, I do have to bring this to a close, but I really, again, just can't overestimate how much I really love this film, and I'm so happy that you were able to finish it and bring it to us at Doc NYC. Thank you.
Oh my God. Me too.
But I thank you so much for joining us here, and for moments like this never last. Thank you again.
You're welcome.